Okay. Share screen. Welcome to the live stream. We'll begin in about 3 minutes as we share this contest here, this broadcast to all of our favorite places around the internet and social media. What's up, everybody? It's the 4th and Goal broadcast. How's everyone doing tonight? Dave must have had to restart his computer. I'm sure he'll be back here in a second.
No, I'm here.
Are you? Oh, you turned your camera off. Okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if it was going to show or not, and I was in the middle of doing all this. I never have enough time to get everything all shared and everything, but it's all right. How you doing on this fine Sunday?
Pretty good, man. I've had a busy weekend, but a good weekend, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I've had a busy weekend myself.
How's everybody been doing tonight?
Yeah, chime in, send some messages to us. Please interact with the show here as we do our thing. Going to talk about, of course, the draft last weekend, expectations for the upcoming season. I'm going to highlight a couple of teams. We're also going to talk about a couple of positions that, of course, the real important ones that were drafted throughout this past draft. And, what do you got in your mind there, buddy?
I got a good topic on a couple of these teams we're going to talk about tonight. I also got something real quick I'm going to share to start the show off because I just thought this is curious. It's our good buddy. I have no clue
what's going through this guy's head anymore. So let's might as well share it.
Okay.
Here we go. We got Antonio Brown back in the headlines once again. So I don't know how many people knew, but he bought our arena football team, the Albany Empire Arena football team. And so far he has used NFL footage for commercials, hasn't paid players or coaches, and has locked out players out of their hotel rooms.
So you're saying that he is beating Dan Snyder as the greatest of all time when it comes to being an owner?
Yeah, pretty much. This is probably the worst, one of the worst stories I've ever heard for owner of a sports team. It just amazes me because, we all know he was in the news for exposing himself. After that, he disappears. So I'm like, maybe he's learning something, behind the scenes. But no, last week I seen a video. He got into it with the security at the arena, and he's telling them he could do whatever he wanted on the field because he's the owner, and all this. So they kicked him off the field. And then a week later, here it is. He's locking players out. The players are locked out of the hotel rooms. No one's got paid, and he's supposedly in trouble with the NFL because he's been using NFL footage as commercials for his games. It's never a dull moment with Antonio Brown these days.
He's an idiot.
I have to agree, David. It just seems like he never learns. When you think people start learning, they really never do. How you doing, Ron? Pretty much. That's exactly it is. Brown has not changed. He's still the same person, and at this point, it's not looking good. Pretty much, it's let's see what's going to happen next in the Antonio Brown
Well,
world.
listen, okay, I have some skin in the game here, and I'm going to tell you why. Just my opinions on things we're having, and this is a little off topic, of course, but we're discussing football, and they've got the CTE, they've got the concussions, they're trying to cut down on them. But in this country
concussions are trying to cut down on them. But in this country,
you need to mute your phone. We're having a mental health crisis, in this country. There is a stigma about talking to people, getting help, taking medication, things that help people. I don't think that Antonio Brown has been right since he took that big shot against the Bengals. And I had the dude's name on the tip of my tongue and I can't think of it but he got kicked out of the league for those big shots. And do you remember the name of the guy that took him out in the playoff game?
Buffett or
Vontez Burfict.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I just need a little help there. It's Vontez Burfict. Ever since he got hit, it's been one silly thing after another, not thinking clearly, freezing his feet, when he was going to be a Raider. And then, the way he treats people around him, and he doesn't pay his bills, the personal chef and the girlfriends, and taking the jersey off when he, refused to go back in the game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's just been one thing after another. The guy has been talked to, I'm sure, many times about going and seeing someone, and, getting literally his head examined. And I'm not sure, it's all private. I'm not sure that has occurred,
Exactly.
Things continue to happen. And, I don't believe he'll ever, I'm going to be a Baltimore Raven, last week or whatever, after Odell Beckham signed and after Lamar Jackson signed, he was going, oh, I'm coming out of retirement after he badmouthed the NFL and Tom Brady and everybody else. You know, I just don't think that he is going to, you know, I just don't think that he is going to be an NFL player anytime soon. And I don't think maybe ever, if ever.
I don't think
And
it's safe
so,
for him.
You know, I just, you know, and I think that it's unfortunate. There's a lot of other people that do not have a spotlight on them, like Antonio Brown does, that are probably going through these same type of situations. And you can't control people.
Yeah.
You can't make them get help. You can't make them see a doctor. You know, I don't know how things work, you know, sometimes. I remember watching movies back in the day where they could just snatch somebody up and have them committed, you know, and that doesn't actually happen in the real world.
Yeah.
You know, and it's unfortunate, you know, that we start the show off with that, but it is funny, but you know, there's a serious side to it as well.
Exactly. You know, only people, you know, hopefully maybe one day he'll wake up and, you know, seek help. Other than that, you know, he keeps playing with fire, he's eventually gonna get burnt for good. But anyways, let's get the show off the road.
Is yours froze up on your phone? Because mine is. It isn't now. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe I just need to clear some stuff out.
No,
But it isn't now. It's fine. Okay, so yeah, show on the road. Let's begin with what's happened this week. You know, they've had the draft. And once the draft has been had and everybody gets all these, you know, drafted players in, the first thing they do is they start calling all these players that are not being drafted. Okay. And so there is a ton of undrafted talent out there. And we have seen again and again players that were not drafted that come into the league and take the league by storm. Okay. Priest Holmes was an undrafted player. Kurt Warner was an undrafted player. You know, it can be done. It can be done. You don't have to be drafted to make it in the NFL. You just need to get invited to a camp. And there's a lot of guys out there that maybe, you know, that kind of puts a chip on their shoulder. I should have been drafted. They said I was going to be drafted. I didn't care that it was the 5th round. I was going to go to a team, and they didn't pick me. Nobody picked me. You know, look at last year. Brock Purdy was the last player selected. He started the NFC Championship game, Chris.
that is true. I mean,
You know, you don't have to be, you know, right place, right time, obviously, for Brock Purdy, okay? But you don't have to be selected to make it in the NFL. We've seen it time and time again. And so rookie mini camps, you know, the rookie camps are all starting to open up this weekend. You know, the players are getting assigned their numbers and they're getting their jerseys and helmets fitted. And, you know, they're going to start learning the playbook. And you've got all these extra people, 90 people on a team that's going to eventually get cut down to 53 roster spots. So there's 37 people on every team that, you know, they're all working to try to get one of those roster spots. Now, they've got practice squads, and the practice squads have been increased over the last several years, especially in light of COVID. So you can still make the practice squad. But, you know, for the most part, the undrafted free agents that come in are going to have to earn their spots. They're going to have to make an impression. But I've saw some pretty big names, to be honest. You know, I didn't write them all down or type them up and make a graphic or anything, but there was some pretty good names out there that I was stunned that they didn't get drafted.
yeah.
And so, that's one of the things that you got going on. But I want to start out now, if that's all right. I want to see, am I able to share?
Oh,
You might want to do that here. I
yeah,
want to start out with, the people that did get drafted.
You're good.
And so for that, purposes there, I want to talk about, what we can expect here going forward. The top 5 quarterbacks as they were drafted into the league. Okay. Top 5 drafted quarterbacks. You've got Bryce Young. Okay. Of course, he was the number 1 overall pick. CJ Stroud was the 2nd quarterback taken. Then Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and then finally Hendon Hooker. We talked about Hendon Hooker last week a little bit because he's with your Detroit Lions. But let's start with Bryce Young. Bryce Young's coming into a team with the Carolina Panthers where he's got a first-year head coach with the organization, but a guy who has been a head coach in Frank Reich. He has been surrounded this offseason prior to him being drafted. Frank Reich has brought in a lot of weapons for the Carolina Panthers. You're looking at wide receivers like DJ Chark. You've got Adam Thielen at receiver. At tight end, they got Hayden Hurst. They got Miles Sanders at running back. And so, he is going to have some weapons around him if they elect to start him right away. If they do not, he can rely on Andy Dalton to be the starter from the beginning and, be kind of, give him the tutelage that he needs to be a professional quarterback as we go forward. I think that with the moves that they have made, Carolina can be dangerous this season. They had a pretty decent defense last year. And while there's been a lot of movement both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, if they can continue the momentum that they had at the end of last season, I think that Carolina can challenge for the NFC South division. What do you think, Bud?
I think you're right on. I think Carolina, I think about Carolina, they're actually sitting in a pretty good spot because they got who did they sign? Andy Dalton, is it?
The tight end is Hayden Hurst.
No, not the tight end. Who's the veteran quarterback they got again?
Andy Dalton.
That's right. And so they got Andy Dalton to start it out. But I also believe Bryce Young, because they say he's there's a lot of people say he's pro ready right now. And with their wideout core and what they've done to their team, I think he has a shot that he could win that QB battle in camp. But I still expect Andy Dalton to get the start of the season. And I think Carolina's in a good spot. If Dalton gets hurt, Young's going to get the start, to take over and get available playing time. So if you look at 2024, that's the year this team's going to be really something to deal with, I believe. But this year, with their division, how it's shaped out to be, they could compete this year if everything goes right, I believe, because they're not in a strong division.
I think that the pressure that there comes with being the number 1 pick, eventually Bryce Young is going to start, but I'm not sure that he will begin the season as the starter. I think that they will go early on with Andy Dalton unless Bryce Young just lights it on fire in preseason and training camp. They want to get him the experience. There are 2 schools of thought, and it goes for all of these quarterbacks that we're looking at here. And the 2 schools of thought are, one, throw them in the fire and get them some experience. The problem with that is that if they don't have the time to get rid of the ball because you have a poor offensive line or you don't have any weapons. They kind of get the NFL version of post-traumatic stress disorder. They're shell-shocked. They're trying to get rid of the ball real fast. They're scared they're going to get sacked. They're worried about getting hit. You got people coming at them 100 miles an hour. They're not used to the speed of the game. And so a lot of things can happen to, somebody that may be an elite player. They just need a little seasoning. And so that's the first school of thought. The second school of thought is you sit them and you let them wait and learn. And we've seen this over the years. Steve McNair didn't play the first 2 years that he was in the NFL with the Oilers and the Titans. And, he had Chris Chandler ahead of him, and they, played pretty well those 2 years that he was there. Chandler is a Super Bowl quarterback. He led the Atlanta Falcons to the Super Bowl appearance in 1998, because he got traded to Atlanta when they decided to start Steve McNair. Alex Smith was the starter in Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes comes in. They had him sit and learn at the feet of a proven pro who had taken him to the playoffs each of the previous 3 seasons, and let him sit and learn the speed of the game, make sure he's surrounded with weapons, make sure that he is comfortable so that when he goes out there, he knows what he needs to do, and you're not really, putting his feet to the flames. So there's 2 schools of thought there, and it'll be interesting to see how each of these quarterbacks, end up, turning out when this, season begins.
Yeah.
And so you go now to a guy who I definitely think is going to be sitting at the beginning of the year, and that's the second overall pick in C.J. Stroud in Houston, Chris.
You think he don't start?
I think he sits for sure. I think they've got Case Keenum is going to be the starter there. Now they brought in, just like Carolina, they have brought in a lot of different pieces. They've got some new wide receivers. They've got some new running backs. They've been working on the offensive line, but I think they're going to concentrate this year on defense. They've got a defensive coach in DeMeco Ryans. And so they want to, secure the defense, work on the offense a little bit, allow C.J. Stroud to sit and learn, watch and see how it's done. Case Keenum has played for many teams. He has started for many teams, including for Houston. He used to be in Houston a few years ago before he joined. I think he went from Houston to the Rams the year that the Rams moved to L.A., and then he played for the Minnesota Vikings, and since then he's been in Denver, he's been in Cleveland, he's been in Buffalo. Now he is back in Houston. So he has bounced around a little bit, but he's a veteran pro. He knows how to play, he knows how to win, and if he's got a good surrounding cast around him, they can, right the ship, as it were, heading forward in preparation for Stroud to be the starter going into next year.
Yeah. I agree with that one for sure. They got Case Keenum, he's been around the league for some years, unless it's really that bad, what I'm saying, then, maybe you throw Stroud in towards the end of the season, let him get some games underneath his belt.
And that could happen, especially if he's been sitting most of the season. Let him get his feet wet. They did that with Mahomes the last game of the season, his rookie year. I could see that.
Now, I mean, that pretty much covers Stroud. Now, Richardson, he could be the start. He could get the start right off the bat. I mean, I think he could beat out.
I'm worried about how they're going to handle him. For me, he only really started one full season at Florida. But he is young, so they've got some time to groom him properly. You've got a guy in front of him in Gardner Minshew, who is coming in here. He's the knowledgeable quarterback because they're going to run the system that the new head coach, Shane Steichen, was running as the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. So they come in together. He'll be able to, help teach the rookie. The rookie will get the speed of the game. He'll be able to sit behind him. I think that's the smart thing to do. But because he hasn't played a whole lot, they're talking about letting him play right away. And I think that could be a mistake. I think they've got a decent offensive line. They've got Quentin Nelson. I think that they have, worked on their offensive line here this offseason. So he, might have a decent line in front of him. They're going to run the football with Jonathan Taylor. So, he's got some weapons to throw the football to. But this one's the tricky one here. I really think it is.
Yeah, I think it really depends on Ginsey or
Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I think it really depends on him and his play. I think if he can come in and move that offense and play at a pretty good level, then he's going to get the nod. But if he comes in there and he's shaky as well, I think that might cause the coach to throw Richardson in a little early. I think he needs a year to develop out of all these quarterbacks, for sure. But, he got that run game he can run. And, you know how that goes. If their season starts going bad again, fans are going to start calling for him.
Oh, sure. They want to see him, they don't want to feel like they've wasted a first-round draft pick. They have gone over the last few years from quarterback to quarterback to quarterback because Andrew Luck retired. He was their future and long-term plan. And when he decided he was done, they didn't really have a plan. So you got, you went Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. Some of these are big names. And I think if they'd have been given, some more help around them, I think that the Colts could have endured and done well. This is a team that managed to beat Kansas City last year. They've been in the playoffs,
Well, their defense has been one of the best
2 years
defense.
ago, okay, when Phillip Rivers was the quarterback, they had Buffalo on the ropes in Buffalo, but because Phillip Rivers wasn't mobile, they just blitzed the hell out of them, and that ended their season. So, that goes for the Colts. So we'll move ahead to Will Levis here. Will Levis, of course, very disappointed in his draft experience. He was one of the players that was invited to Kansas City for the draft. He had some great arm candy with the girlfriend and the sister and all that, but they never called his name on day one. And it's reminiscent of the time that Aaron Rodgers, who thought he was going to go high, fell all the way down to the Packers the year he was drafted. And, but he gets the call early in day two. Tennessee Titans have traded up. And early on, the head coach of Tennessee, Mike Vrabel, has said it's going to be an open quarterback competition. They've got Malik Willis from last year, who played at Liberty, who was, an earlier round draft pick for them last year, but he didn't show much at all behind a porous offensive line. a team that really didn't have any weapons. They've still got Ryan Tannehill there as the incumbent. And, with Ryan Tannehill as the starter, when they had the weapons, when the defense was top notch, this team just 2 short seasons ago was the number 1 seed in what is now a loaded AFC conference, Chris.
That is true. It's kind of crazy to see the position they're really truly in right now, to be honest, because 2 years, like you said, 2 years ago, they were number 1 seed. 2 years in the future, they're on a verge of a rebuild. And I don't think Week Willis is the guy. I mean, I can't say he's might have put enough work in this offseason to be a different quarterback this year. I mean, we'll have to wait to see what we see on the field. Will Levis, I feel like he's pretty mad at the draft, how the draft turned out for him. I think he's going to have a chip in his shoulder. And I'm kind of curious to see how he comes out the gate. And I want to see where Ryan Tannehill is. Can Ryan Tannehill hold these young kids off from the starting job?
Yeah, Will Levis had a really great season, not this past year, but the year before that there in Kentucky. He transferred to Kentucky because he couldn't beat out the starter at Penn State, another player that was drafted. But, he had a rough year this last year, probably due to injuries, both to him and some of the players around him. But, he showed out at the combine, and they had been talking about him the year before. And so that is why I think that he was drafted as high as he has been. He and Hendon Hooker, who we'll talk about again here in a moment, are the older players, that are coming in. They've had more than 1 season of starting, but, to me, it doesn't matter that they're 25 years old and not 21 or 22, because quarterbacks are playing till they're 40 years old now. Now, I know not everybody can be, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, but if you're given the opportunity and you are still capable of performing, you've got yourself somebody that, you're bringing in, you believe in them. If you put good people around them, just like any team when you're building a good team, if you put good people around them and they're able to perform, they'll be around for a while. And so, I think that Will Levis is going to have to prove himself in the mini camps. I think he's going to have to, get his nose to the grindstone and really study so that he can push. And I don't think it's going to be hard for him to be the second quarterback. It's taking the starting job away from Tannehill that will be, the rough part. But because he's a high second-round draft pick, he's going to get some benefit of the doubt. If Tannehill goes down for any reason, Levis will be the starter in there, and they'll give him the opportunity to see what he has, because I think that the jury's kind of out on Malik Reed or Malik Willis.
Yeah, I have to agree unless I see something different this year in the preseason.
And that brings us to your boy Hendon Hooker. And I'm looking at our, some of our comments. Brandon Biglin, who is a Giants fan, says that Hooker will be the one that's successful because he's not expected to start at all this year. They know he's going to sit because you guys have Jared Goff. He's coming off of an injury. And so they don't have any expectations. They just know, hey, we're drafting this guy. He can learn the system. He can take all the time he wants because we got one of the top 10 offenses in the NFL with Jared Goff as our quarterback.
See,
And we don't, this is a situation where, and you can, go along with this as a Detroit Lions fan, where in the past, they probably would not have drafted Hendon Hooker because they can't use him right away.
yeah,
But now they've got some cachet. They had a winning season. They're on the right path. People are picking them to win the division. They're making smart choices. And while the fans aren't always necessarily in agreement with their draft picks that they had, if these things pan out, Hendon Hooker's not necessarily the quarterback of the future for the Detroit Lions.
I don't think
he
he
plays
is.
well in preseason and he shows out, when he does get his opportunities, he's somebody that can be traded for assets later if he doesn't turn out to be their starting quarterback. Because as you mentioned this week, they're already, talking contract extension with Jared Goff.
Yeah. And like you said, quarterbacks are playing till they're 40 years old. Not saying that Jared Goff is going to be in Detroit till he's 40. Not saying he can play till he's 40. But Jared Goff is only going to be like 29 years old by the time the season starts. Maybe no older than 30. I'm pretty sure it's 29 now. So for that matter, he still has quite a bit of years left in him to play football. So what I think the Lions did is I don't think we trust Nate Sudfeld as a true backup. Let's be honest. So Hooker was there. We covered a lot of big need, we got a lot of the guys we got early in the draft. Why not grab Hooker? Like you said, now maybe next year they see him in preseason. Maybe something happens with Goff, he steps in for a game. You know what I mean? Somebody's quarterback goes down. They're desperate. They got a playoff team. Now, there's that option. Or what if something forbid happens to Goff?
Right.
In a playoff run. Hooker is 25 years old, so I knew he was probably going to slip back in the draft just for that fact.
Sure.
Because a lot of teams
the injury.
And the injury on top of it. So, because I didn't think a lot of teams were going to want to invest their future in a 25-year-old quarterback, unfortunately. I think, maybe I'm surprised a team like maybe Tennessee, maybe because of the injury, didn't grab him. Because they're looking for a quarterback right now. Hooker, if Hooker was 100%, that could have been the guy for Tennessee right there. Because in the last 2 years, Hooker only threw 2 interceptions in his last 2 years as a starting quarterback in college. So he can run. He's smart when he runs. He can throw the ball. So I'm not going to rule out that there's a chance he beats out Goff. If we don't re-sign Goff and he stays on his contract and runs out, that means Detroit's legitimately going to give Hooker a chance. Now that's possible, but I don't really think so. And it really comes down to this season. If Goff takes the Lions to a division title, to a playoff run, I think hands down he gets extension. If he gets a 5-year extension, I think that kind of kills Hooker's chances to be a true starter for the Lions, but not necessarily in the league, because then at that point we could always trade for more assets later on. So I think honestly, I like the pick. I liked Hooker as a quarterback, and anyway, so it's a win-win for me. I feel a little bit more confident, especially if he's able and healthy to go this year in case his number's called at some point. I do like that fact. It makes me relax a little bit because I know last year, you see Goff get sacked and you're like, oh, that's a bad hit. And,
right. Yeah.
And it's like, I don't really trust Nate
confident behind him.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
TTV Motor City says he thinks Hooker's the future. Tell us, thanks for joining us on the podcast here, bud. But tell us what you think of Goff. Why, he's the future, you got Hendon Hooker as the future. Tell us what you think of Goff, Motor City. And, how long do you think he'll be around? Do you think they'll give him the extension, or is he just going to seamlessly, move on to the next quarterback? Because as we talked about, he could be a trade piece if Goff continues to perform. He's doing well in the offense that they have. Chris is worried about them losing their offensive coordinator at the end of the season if they put up another top 10 offense. And, that could affect the quarterback position also.
Yeah. See, I'd be honest, this is my true reason. This is just my reason why I think they got Hooker. Because I'm not going to sit there and say, Motor City is completely wrong. Hooker could be the future. He really could be. We really don't know what Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell behind closed doors have got master plan. I think he's just the backup quarterback. That's how I see it. I think Goff right now has earned the right to be a starter, especially if he takes us to a great year. I think he gets re-signed. I think Hooker is going to be a backup unless we use him for trade. But here's another thing. Me and my best friend Kenny today, we're just talking about this. Another thing is Dan Campbell and this coaching staff, they're wild with their play calls. They got cojones. They're not afraid to call any type of play in a game. And that's why I think another big reason we drafted Hooker is the backup. Because I believe our coaches have a big enough cojones that they'll have scheme packages and plays for Hooker to come in and out of a game, kind of maybe like a Tayshon Hill, maybe not, playing receiver. But I would not doubt that they come up with package schemes with plays. Hooker for running plays, or even I think they even would have him throw the ball in some type of plays.
That would be like a trick where you expect him to come in to run the football, and he goes for the forward, backs up, and then chucks it deep to Williams or Jones or somebody.
I could really see Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson coming up with play schemes. So I think there's a lot of things with this Hooker pick. We just don't know the full picture of it until it plays out, unfortunately. We can only make predictions. But I truly think Goff is the guy. I think he's the franchise guy. He seems like it. He fits in with everybody. He's working with everybody all offseason. And I think Hooker is the wild card that you could see possibly come the starter or come a hell of a backup. And I think, like I said, I really do think they'll have certain packages where they'll mess with teams. And because, look at it. We still lead the NFL going for it the most on fourth downs. Tell me you cannot see Hooker coming in on a 4th and 1 or a 4th and 2.
You better get his knee. You better make sure his knee's healthy before they go doing crazy stuff like that.
Oh, for sure.
I don't get him hurt.
I don't think it depends on where his knee's at by training camp and how healthy. Because if you've seen what they did with Williams, I don't expect them to do much with Hooker until they know he's 100% ready. They've showed that when they draft a player coming from an injury, they're going to let that kid fully develop and recover before they're going to push him in the football field. So it really just depends on where he's at when the season starts.
Well, let's move on. We talked about the top 5 quarterbacks, and that'll mean that it's time to move on to the top 5. Oh, it says quarterbacks. I didn't change it to running backs. I screwed up the graphic. Well, so anyway, the top 5 running backs, and we'll begin with Bijan Robinson, who went to the Atlanta Falcons. He, a lot of people thought that he would be later in the round, possibly go to the Philadelphia Eagles. You've got this guy is coming out of Texas. He is, just a really good running back. He's solid all around. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And it's interesting to me that Atlanta picked him to come and play for them because they had a great running game last year. They've been using Cordarrelle Patterson as a running back. And, they were using, they got Tyler Algiers last year in the draft. And so they've got running game, already there in Atlanta. So the fact that they drafted this guy is kind of amazing to me. I'm really surprised that he got picked there. But the word on the street is that that's what they were going to do because it was in a lot of people's mock drafts that's what was going to happen.
Yeah. See, I think this is a really good pick for Atlanta because here's the thing. They haven't had a true, back for a while now, like a true game changer back. And I think that's what they got in this draft with Robinson. Also, they got Patterson. Patterson is he's one of those great players you love watching because he's so dynamic. He's so dynamic on the kick return. He can run the ball in the backfield great as well. And then you can put him out as a receiver. But the problem, too, is last year he battled injuries. He's that type of player. You're using him so much as different positions, and you're always moving around. He's always taking a beating week in and week out. So I think this works out great because now you can reduce his carries and still keep him as a receiver. And he can still carry the ball too, but maybe he can have that right balance between both moving around positions where he can still be healthy for you. And then you got Jit Robinson there to pound it between the tackles, all three downs. And you still can have Patterson and a healthy Patterson as that, So to me, we talked a lot about Atlanta's offense and being in that division. Now, I think if they can get play out of that rookie quarterback, Riddler, I think they could be a team, that dark horse in that division for sure now with that running back pick. I like it.
Shifting gears just a little bit, but still talking about Atlanta. Did you see the story this week that they were on the verge of trading for Kyler Murray and couldn't make the money work?
I did not hear that story.
Yeah. Okay. Before the draft occurred, okay, Atlanta was going to trade the number 8 pick, but Arizona was going to have to eat some of the salary for Kyler Murray. They were going to trade the number 8 pick to Atlanta or to Arizona. And Kyler Murray was going to be an Atlanta Falcon. They were working on the contract, to get everything all squared away, and they couldn't make the money work. And Atlanta wasn't sure they wanted to give up the number 8 pick this year because Murray was still coming off of an injury. I saw that and I was like, they made these trades at the beginning of the draft this last, but with Houston, and they're lined up to have the number 1 and number 2 possible picks next year because hands down, everybody's talking about Arizona having the worst roster in the NFL. Murray's not going to be back at least until midseason. They've been talking about, a trade or releasing DeAndre Hopkins for salary cap purposes. And so it looks to me like, and they've already started talking about it. I mean, we're a year away from the next draft where Arizona is going to pick up Caleb Williams to be their new quarterback, and they're going to get rid of Kyler Murray in Arizona.
I mean, but see, here's the thing, though. And I'm not saying it won't happen. I mean, maybe Atlanta, after this season since they were the first to engage. I'm just kind of surprised that people want to engage in this kid.
Yeah, I don't like his attitude. There was a reason that they had that, study clause in his contract. It became a big deal and it blew up, and the relationship between him and the team, was kind of shaky because it came out that was in the contract. And, they cut that out of the contract for PR reasons, if anything.
Yep.
And, but
he
was drafted to replace a quarterback who was picked in the first round the year before.
Yeah.
Now, I know Josh Rosen hasn't turned into anything in the NFL, but he hasn't had a chance to play behind a real offensive line surrounded by weapons.
For sure.
And he's one of those guys that got thrown into the fire and got the NFL PTSD, because he has bounced from one team to another because he wants to be in the league. He wants to be a quarterback. But the problem is that his reaction to things is skewed because of how his first year went in Arizona.
Yeah.
They screwed him up, and they're like, oh, well, we'll just draft another quarterback. So they bring in Kyler Murray and they jettison Josh Rosen. Okay?
Exactly.
And so here's a guy who, in every interview I've ever seen him do, he just doesn't seem like a leader to me.
No.
His talent gets him ahead. Okay?
Exactly.
People give him the benefit of the doubt because of what he's capable of doing. But here he is now. He's coming off of an injury. I always thought he was frail, just frail. That's my problem with Bryce Young. Okay. It's not because of how short they are. Their build is not stout. You have to be able to take some shots back there, or you're going to get beat up real bad.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
See, I don't think Murray's actually fragile from watching him play, because I watch that boy take some licks and get right back up with no hesitation. I just think in his head, I think he, since when he got drafted, I think everybody was shocked to really see him get drafted by Arizona like that. I knew he was going to get picked high. I just didn't really.
Oh, I thought the writing was on the wall. The reason they brought Cliff Kingsbury in to be the head coach, was because of his relationship with Kyler Murray. They knew they were taking him number one. Everybody knew he was going to be going number one.
No, I know. I knew all the reports. It's just for some reason I didn't really think it was going to go that way. Because it simply is, we all know how everybody drafts. Whoever they say is going number one, sometimes don't really go number one. So, I don't take nothing serious until the draft was really playing out, and it happened. I think Kyle Murray could be a good quarterback, but my problem is because he got taken number one, he got that star on him, that spotlight. I think the dude's just lost in this damn spotlight, to be honest. And he's thinking that, he don't have to do all this extra work that everybody expects him to do. I mean, the reports say he's streaming video games more than anybody in the league. I've heard people talk about that. I've seen a few things pop up on Twitter and repost players and him going at it that he's played with over the last year.
I'll tell you this, okay? I wouldn't be surprised if within 2 years the guy's back to playing baseball. Okay, because there was a lot of questions about, well, are you going to pick baseball or are you going to pick, football, before he came out. And, he's like, oh, I'm concentrating completely on football, but it just feels like and I'm not downgrading baseball players in the least here, but it feels like he wouldn't have to do as much work to participate and be a baseball player as he does happen to learn playbooks and schemes and routes and run an entire team, as the quarterback. And now he's got a new head coach again, and now he's got a new offensive system he's got to learn. And he's going to have new players around him that he's going to have. And then he's not even going to be able to play until mid-season. And so, he when he comes back and starts to play, he better set the world on fire, because if he don't, or maybe they'll decide they just don't want him to play. They'll say it's for his protection, but they don't want him to play because they know they're looking at the draft going forward. If he goes in there and plays and does well, they'll win some games, and that ain't what they got in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's something for sure we're going to have to keep an eye on and watch how it plays out, because it's going to be very early if especially he's healthy. Now, I will say this. I did see a video, and believe it or not, Murray was like squatting like 300 pounds the other day at the gym. And I was pretty impressed. He had a knee brace on and all that, but he was squatting like 300 pounds on his legs already.
Squatting 300 pounds and taking a direct shot from a 300-pounder running at you at 20 mile an hour is two different things.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'm just saying it was pretty impressive for how early it is in his recovery is all I was saying. So it just really depends on where he's at.
Well, going back here, how we got on this whole subject was we began talking about Atlanta and the supposed possible trade before the draft between Arizona and Atlanta. But let's go back to top 5 running backs. We've already discussed Bijan Robinson. Here's your chance to talk all about how you feel about Jahmyr Gibbs. I know he was the second best player at running back, according to Pro Football Focus, and obviously he was taken second, with the 12th pick by your Detroit Lions. He's a versatile player. He's the kind of player that can both receive and run the ball. And, we've already talked about how he's going to have, Jared Goff at quarterback for Detroit, so they're going to pass the ball quite a bit. They lost Jamal Williams in the offseason, and they traded Swift to Philadelphia after they acquired Jahmyr Gibbs in the draft. So they got him to kind of be, split time with David Montgomery, who comes over from Chicago. And I think, and we've talked about it before, that David Montgomery is going to be kind of like the goal line back. He's got a nose for the end zone. He's a tackle-breaking machine. Gibbs is going to be an offensive weapon for you guys going forward at multiple positions, both receiving and running.
Yeah. I see a tad bit differently, though. I still think Montgomery is going to be the starting back. I think Gibbs, for at least this year, will be the change of pace back. I think he's going to be moving in slot receiver and coming in. I think also with how the Lions have showed their offense this year, they stay with the hot hand. So I think there will be games if Gibbs obviously has more of the hot hand than Montgomery in that game. I think he's going to get more touches for sure. But I think the splits between backs will be pretty balanced, just because I think Gibbs is going to be moving around in different positions so much. Dan, like we talked about Hooker, special packages. Lions are a very aggressive team. I don't see that changing. I think they'll still make smarter decisions now since they're a better team overall. But I still expect them to go for it on 4th downs and do their plays like they like to do. And so I think that's where Gibbs plays a huge part in this offensive scheme, because I think they're going to have a lot of packages for that guy, because they're going to move him around to different positions, different looks. I mean, I know last week I described what you could do. I mean, you could put Gibbs and Montgomery both in the backfield. You'll have defense on their toes at that point because they don't know who's going to get the ball. Now, let's not forget, Montgomery also averaged 4.4 yards a carry with Chicago last year, and their offensive line was trash last season. They didn't have much of an offensive line at all. So Montgomery's got a good old line. Detroit has a good old line for both of these guys. So I really truly think the Lions could have the best running back duo in the league right now coming into this year. And I like that because that just makes Jared Goff's job a lot easier. That also keeps, gotta keep the defense honest. And that works for, St. Brown, Williams when he's back. Also with Jamal with the rookie getting himself suspended, Williams, for 6 games, Gibbs is going to be immediate impact because he can play slot receiver. So he's going to have the ability to fill that hole until Williams can play after week 6. So that's another huge thing for this season. It kind of works out that we got him in a weird way. Unfortunately, I'd rather have Williams in week 1. I think every Lion fan would. But, at least we got a guy just like explosive that can fill the hole for when he's gone for those 6-game suspension.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this guy here, I think that a lot of your Lions fans were up in arms because they traded back from where they were. They could have had Bijan Robinson. And, they're like, if we were going to take a running back, why didn't we take Bijan Robinson? And I think that it was safe to say that they felt like both these players were equals in terms of value, and they were able to pick him up further down in the picks and still get more draft capital to do something with. And so, while a lot of people may be upset that they took them, it didn't pull the trigger for Bijan Robinson, I think that this guy is going to fit right in. I understand why they did it when it comes to, they're looking at long-term success. The Lions fans are so starved for a winner. They want success right now. They don't care about next year. They want this year, and so they're not looking at the overall big picture. Some of them that are upset, they don't see that when you're trying to build an organization for the long haul, which they're not used to, that you need to do things like this. You need to take the risk that you're, possibly taking the lesser of the 2 players, but all the extra things that come with that in an effort by moving down and doing what they did.
Exactly. I mean, this opens up a lot of opportunities. The one thing I liked what Jahmyr Gibbs said after he was drafted by Detroit. He said he was so excited to play with Williams again. And I like the quote he used, because he's like, we played in Alabama together, and when we're both on the field, you ain't going to shut both of us down. And he's 100% right. And now just think of that, and that's what fans don't think of. He's right. You put him in the slot, you put Williams out on the route, those 2 guys could handily beat. You can't double team both of them. And if you want to double team both of them, go for it. Because then you got St. Brown wide open. Then you're going to have the tight end spot open. Then, you know what I mean? Then you have Montgomery coming out of the backfield. There's so much possibilities, and he puts that offense over the top. We kept the top 5 offense last year. This year, with him in the mix, and if everything goes to plan, we could have the number one offense this year.
You ain't going to have a better offense than Kansas City. Don't start that shit.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's possible.
Oh.
I'm not saying we're going to have the number one. I'm just saying with Jamar Gibbs, and if everything works right with that offense, we were top 5. We were right up there with KC all season. So that could put us over the hunt and give us the number one offense. It could. I'm not going to predict that, though, because we all know how football works.
Yeah.
Sometimes shit just don't work out the way you think. Also, I want to bring this comment up from Ron. Ron, I heard this rumor too. Thank you for reminding me. There's also a rumor floating around that the Lions are in talks with the Rams on training for, what's his name? Van Jefferson. Wide receiver.
Van Jefferson, that'd be a nice pickup. I like Van Jefferson.
I like him too. If you had it, so I mean, sounds like the Lions might not be done.
If they bring Van Jefferson in, that'll be the end of Josh Reynolds.
I would say so.
Yeah,
and I would actually be okay with
that. Where is Ron commenting at? Because I don't have him on Facebook.
He's on 4TH&Goal Sports.
Oh, I guess I didn't.
No,
I thought they were all on the same deal or whatever.
No, you're reviewing the one that I got going directly to my Facebook page.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me take a look here and see what it says. Oh, hi, Ron. Anyway, yeah, because I was reading somebody else's stuff. All right, so anyway, that moves us on to the 52nd overall pick. And, so here's the second round. The Seattle Seahawks last year, they got a diamond in Kenneth Walker III. And so it's interesting to me, although Seattle has been kind of a team that has running back by committee, that they pick up Zach Cabernet, the former UCLA Bruin, here at number 52. And so now they've got Kenneth Walker III. They lost Rashad Penny in free agency to the Eagles. And so they bring in Zach Cabernet. That still gives them 3 running backs because they still got Travis Homer. And, Zach rushed for almost 1,200 yards at UCLA this last year. And I think that this is another real good weapon for Geno Smith and the Seahawks to have going into this top-heavy NFC Western division. It's basically between them and the 49ers this year. Both teams made the playoffs. Seattle hung in there against San Francisco in the opening round, and then their halftime adjustments, they just swarmed them in the second half.
Yeah.
And the 49ers beat them down. And so Seattle remembers that. They know they're going to need to run the football more, not throw as much. When you're running the football, we all know that controls the clock, keeps the other team's offense off the field. It tires out these defenses. Now, San Francisco added Hargrave from the Eagles. So they've got a big run stopper in the middle, to stop, Cabernet and also, Walker. But both of these guys are capable of busting it loose for big chunks. In college, Zach ran for 20 to 30 yards at a clip on at least 10 plays this last year. And so, this is, like I said, another weapon added to Geno Smith and the Seahawks, Chris.
I think I'm going to give a shout out to Pete Carroll and the Seahawks fans. Because about time they address this need. Now, they got Walker last year, which is a great pickup, even though I don't personally really like him because he's from Michigan State. But I will admit he's a good running back. I would not even been pissed that the Lions got him last year, for that matter. But obviously, we didn't need a running back last year. I thought he was one of the better backs in last year's draft. But my thing is, Pete Carroll has always liked the running back committee. He's always had multiple backs, even with Marshall Lynch. And when he won Super Bowls and went to the Super Bowl, or he won a Super Bowl and then went to another Super Bowl, and, but he's always wanted multiple backs, which is a good thing in the NFL. But I feel like he's waited so long to get rid of Rashad Penny and a few of those backs. And he just kept trying to reuse those backs over and over. And every single year, they would always find themselves hurt in all different types of injuries. And I think that was Seattle's downfall for a lot of the years, even last few years before Russ left, was the running game was always out of whack, banged up, injured. So, they're basically signing players that you didn't even hear of and plugging running backs in there for the last few seasons. Walker came in there, gave him some solid play. You add Charnett in there this year. Like you said, now you got two backs that can break it loose for the long haul and eat you yards. And I think they just helped Geno Smith out tremendously. I was really surprised in how good Geno played last year. And honestly, with this move, they get him another running back to pair with Walker. I think that makes them a dangerous team. I think the 49ers are going to have to really worry about the Seahawks this year because they're going to have the ability to have a great running duo up there. And if Geno plays on the same level and even improves, I want from last year to this year, they're going to be a serious contender in the NFC West.
Yeah. Well, and that means that we're going to move on now to the Saints. And, in pick number 71, they took Kendre Miller. And I don't really know much about him. I was about to look this up, because we're talking about the top 5, running backs that were taken in the draft. I know that they added Jamal Williams, from Detroit. But you've got Alvin Kamara, who's looking into legal trouble from the Pro Bowl 2 years ago. And so he may be having himself some suspension time, and they need a two-headed running game. I think that Mark Ingram is probably done, in the league. He's been there the last couple of years after he spent some time away from New Orleans playing for the Baltimore Ravens. And so with Alvin Kamara probably sidelined due to suspension for a while, you're going to have Miller and Williams going to probably be the running back tandem here for the New Orleans Saints. Miller played at TCU, and just looking here at his statistics from this past season, which I'm looking up. He was second on the team in 2021 when he had 623 rushing yards on only 83 carries and had 7 touchdowns. Now, they don't have, what I'm looking at here. They don't have what his statistics were this last season. But, TCU, if he was the starter, they made it to the college football playoff this last year. And so, if he was the head runner of that team, I know that the Big 12 is not, and we have talked about this before, not the most defensive conference in football, but, he probably put up some pretty good yardage, playing as the lead runner this last year for them. And so I feel good about that when it comes to, New Orleans picking him up. I think New Orleans is going to have a tremendous season. I have liked Derek Carr, despite him being a Raider and I'm a Chiefs fan. He has been stuck with zero defense for years. The New Orleans Saints have defense. and
Yes,
they've
they
got
do.
good wide receivers to throw the ball to. If they have a decent running game, behind him, I think that they are the favorites in the NFC South. And we're going to talk about that when we go through our, preseason predictions prior to the schedule coming out, which is expected this week. May the 11th is supposedly when the schedule is going to be released. And so we're just a few short days away from, finding out a lot of information about the schedule, where people are playing at certain times of the year. It was already basically announced this week. The Chicago Bears are going to play the Kansas City Chiefs in Germany, in either the second or third week of November. And so that'll be a huge game for both those teams. And when it comes to expanding the brand worldwide.
Yeah. I think the Saints, to add to that, I think the Saints are the favorite in the South, in NFC South. I think they needed it back. This kid should be able to perform and do good for him. And it depends. If he can get in there and be ready, learn this playbook, get trust, he could have a big workload to start the season, because we're not sure on how long Kamara's getting. I'm surprised we haven't even found that out yet. I think they're kind of waiting for the court and everything to get taken care of.
I got the statistics here for Kendre Miller at TCU this last year. He ran for 1,400 yards and 17 touchdowns, including a long of a 75-yard run at one point. He's averaging 6.2 yards a carry for the Horned Frogs at TCU, bud.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. He did play for TCU. Well, they beat Michigan's ass in the playoffs, so the kid's speedster, and he's going to have the ability to touch the ball a lot.
So I guess we'll move on now to Tennessee. And last year, Tennessee selected Hassan Haskins, your guy out of Michigan. I thought he was the future for, the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
Behind King Henry. Derrick Henry, of course, has been the starter. Of course, we've talked about it all offseason. They've been shopping Derrick Henry around. He was linked to Philadelphia. He was linked to Buffalo, and we were talking about Tennessee has gone from, the number one seed in the AFC 2 years ago to here they are looking to, do basically a total rebuild. They're looking at a new quarterback. They drafted Will Levis. They drafted Malik Willis last year, trying to find him a new quarterback other than Ryan Tannehill. There's talk that they're going to trade away Derrick Henry. They jettisoned just tons of players this offseason. They lost Bud Dupree and Zach Cunningham. They lost a lot of their offensive line. They had to cut Taylor Lewan, Ben Jones. And so, they're looking at a total rebuild. And so it's interesting to me that they would use a pick on a running back here in Tyjae Spears when they already have Hassan Haskins. And if they're not going to get rid of, Derrick Henry, why are they using, this pick here on a running back?
David, this means two things. Either they have full intention and still trading Derrick Henry before the season starts, which is still a possibility. Or second, they know by next year Derrick Henry will not be on the team for sure. And they might not trust Derrick Henry's health to make it through the season. Now, remind you, Henry's got hurt the last 2 years. So that's what this is telling me. Either they're really going to move on from Derrick Henry, or they're just planning for the future already because they know Henry is getting traded before the 2024 season for sure. That's what I see.
Well, and after looking at what I was looking up his statistics here. He was a dynamic player for Tulane. But this is the guy that's played the last year and a half with no ACL in his knee. Okay. This is the guy that was playing with no ACL. He had an MRI during the season, or they found it. They found it during, the combine, medical examinations. There's like almost no cartilage in his knee, and he has no ACL, and yet he still was able to run for the following. He ran for 1,500 yards and 19 touchdowns for Tulane this last year, which is unbelievable, But picking somebody in the NFL to come in and be, in the kind of position he's going to be in, I would be very concerned about this player going forward. I don't know if they just felt like it was a value pick. They hope he'll be okay going forward because they know he's not going to get as many carries as he would if he was a workhorse. But if they do trade Derrick Henry, you got to think that him and Haskins are going to be in some kind of a running back by committee situation. This guy feels like an injury. I mean, a really easy injury away from being out.
I see where your concern is, and I would be concerned if I was working with the Titans. If I had a choice in that pick, I probably wouldn't have picked the kid, knowing that. But maybe this is a pick where they see him. Maybe it's just a scheme pick. Maybe they just want to use them in certain packages and move them around the field. Maybe it's just a special teams pick, but that's still kind of high for a special teams pick. So, I don't know exactly what they're thinking with that coming out. But I can say this is Haskins can be the dominant back. He can be a workhorse back. He has the build and the mentality for it. So maybe that's what they're seeing. Maybe they're going to, just transition Haskins as the new Derrick Henry for him 2.0 when Henry's not there. And then maybe they just work this kid in on so much carries, but he's not going to touch the ball as much as, a large margin. Time will tell. And it's kind of crazy that this kid still wants to play with his knee like that. But at the same sense, I guess when you put your whole life into being an NFL player, you're not going to walk away from the game. You're going to try to get paid real fast and give it a shot. So,
yeah,
who knows? Maybe this kid goes on and has a 10, 12-year career. Time will tell. I guess the one bright side is you don't have to worry about him tearing the ACL and that knee.
Yeah, well, so there is our spotlight on the top 5 quarterbacks and top 5 running backs that were taken in this draft. We're going to move on at this time to teams. And the first team that I want to talk about and the picks that they made is, a team from the NFC North. And that's going to be the Chicago Bears. The Bears had the number 1 pick in the draft, prior to trading it to the Carolina Panthers. And so, let's take a quick peek here at what they have done this offseason. A team that has kind of been, I'd say, down on their luck for quite a number of years. But, they're going to be a lot better off now with the things that they have done this offseason, Chris. And they made the trade for the first round, getting out of the first number 1 pick And when they moved down with Carolina, they got DJ Moore in that trade. The free agents that they have signed, they got a decent backup quarterback in PJ Walker. You know, he's played for a couple of different teams. Most notably, he was probably the XFL MVP, you know, before they canceled their season with the Houston Roughnecks. You know, he's played for Carolina. He comes out of Temple. And, you know, he was in college with, you know, the former coach of Carolina. That's how he ended up there. You know, I was wrong. I said Travis Summer was still with Seattle. He signed with the Chicago Bears. And then they got Deontay Foreman from Carolina also. Or maybe that's the dude that was playing for Tennessee. But they're working on their offensive line, Nate Davis. They got the tight end from Green Bay and Robert Tonyan. They worked on their linebacking core for sure after they gave away, in my estimation, Roquan Smith to Baltimore. They bring in Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards from Buffalo and Philadelphia. They get DeMarcus Walker, the defensive end from the Broncos. And then in the draft, I think they solidified their offensive line. Darnell Wright played at Tennessee, and he can play both right or left tackle. They got, you know, several defensive linemen as they attempt to rebuild their defense. Of course, they have a defensive head coach in Matt Eberflus. You know, he's going into his second year here, and they've tried to surround, Justin Fields with weapons. You know, last year they traded for Chase Claypool. They've had Darnell Mooney. They've got, you know, they got Cole Kmet at tight end. Now they add DJ Moore. So they're 3 deep across at wide receiver. They're working on their offensive line between Nate Davis and Darnell Wright. I think they'll be much more improved. Justin Fields won't have to run for his life. You look here in the drafted section, Rashawn Johnson was the backup running back at Texas to Bijan Robinson. And he played significant snaps because, as I saw earlier in our comments, Joey D'Angelo said that Gibbs has less miles on him than Bijan because Texas ran the fuck out of him, you know, because they had to run the ball. Their passing offense wasn't that good. Well, here you go. Rashawn Johnson's a real good running back that they're going to add to their, you know, to their group. You know, they still got Khalil Herbert, who they picked up a couple years ago in the draft. And so, you know, they're doing well at running back, I think, if their offensive line holds in there. The funny thing I've got on here, Noah Sewell is the brother, I believe, to you guys as left tackle.
Yep,
right tackle. You know, it'll be a battle of the brothers when, and they'll actually probably get to play each other because he's a linebacker and his brother's an offensive lineman.
Yep.
So
and the funny thing is,
that'll be a fun thing to see during the season.
Well, here's the fun thing is, St. Brown's brother plays for the Bears too. And they have a broadcast, and this past week on their broadcast show, St. Brown owned his brother and was talking some mad shit. And it was funny because they had him at the draft and they had him working like social media, and he had the phone and he went up to the Bear fans and he went like this to the Bear fans, and got all the Bear fans. And then he went over to the Lions fans, and the Lions fans went crazy. And he was telling his brother, he goes, "Your fan base was the worst fan base there. They sat there all night quiet. They weren't even cheering for you guys." And it was just funny to see him going back and forth. They're always talking smack. So I'm kind of curious on to see how these brothers will interact with playing each other twice a year.
Hey, there is another St. Brown coming out next year.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a
three
third
of them.
one. I always thought there was two because
They're
of Hard
all
Knocks.
wide receivers.
No kidding. Their
Yeah.
dad is something. You know, they all work out with their dad and train with their dad. Like their
I
dad is
believe
their
so.
personal coach.
There was a spotlight about it on Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel a couple of years ago, and I believe, and I might have this wrong, so you may want to look it up, if you're looking for more accurate information. But I believe their dad was an Olympian.
Yeah. Oh, the world's strongest man.
And so he was
something.
he's like I don't remember if he was like a 200-meter racer or something like that. But yeah,
No, he's
three boys.
he was a
And
bodybuilder.
all three of them are wide receivers, and they're slowly all coming into the NFL. And so we'll have to start looking for the third one here real soon.
David, he was actually he was a bodybuilder in the Olympics.
Oh, really?
And he won the competition. I don't know if it's counted as the strongest person or but it was in Hard Knocks. They actually interview his dad as well.
Okay.
And he was like the world's strongest man. Like once or twice he won the whole competition. And so he works them all out, and he makes them do like all the the beginner workouts, like almost. Like it's kind of crazy. And he's like, well, if you don't do he's like, a lot of these players, they just want to work on their upper body and their legs, but they don't want to work like specific things like their calves and this and that. He goes, you won't see my boys be tearing calf muscles and groins. He goes, we stretch, we work out every part of the muscle, the whole body. And he really has like, it was crazy because they filmed him doing the whole workout, and he's like, you see them guys? He goes, they're working out right next to each other. He goes, they're not even talking to each other. He's like,
right.
He's like, that's how I train. You don't talk. This is work. And it was just crazy to see how close they are as a family and how hard they work together just to compete in the NFL. So I'm very excited for the third one. I didn't even know there was a little one because they must have left him out due to college reasonings of Hard Knocks.
Well, it says here that he already graduated, so he didn't make it to the NFL. The brother's name is Osiris St. Brown.
Okay.
And he played at Stanford, and also he played at another one too, but mostly Stanford. And so you got Equanimous St. Brown, Osiris St. Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But Osiris is 25, and he is currently not in the NFL, according to this. So I thought he was coming up, and I was like, holy smokes, they're going to have another one, but I guess not, but that would have been fun.
Yeah, I'm actually waiting to see the St. Brown on the Bears.
Right.
I'm waiting for him to see if he could do something. I'm not throwing no shade because I know this game's hard. But he hasn't done much.
He did not play very well when he was with the Packers. He signed a free agent deal, I want to say 2 years ago, to go to Chicago after he had spent some time with Green Bay, but he wasn't getting the ball thrown his way because you had, of course, Devontae Adams, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Robert Tonyan. They've been throwing the ball a lot to the running back side of the backfield the last several years. And so he just wasn't a favorite target of Aaron Rodgers. And so, he didn't get a lot of run. And it doesn't feel like he's going to get a lot of run now in Chicago with the receivers that they have brought in over the past 2 years.
Yep, but when you get the playing time and you don't perform and take advantage of that playing time you get, at the end of the day, you cannot be mad at anybody but yourself. But all in all, I think the Bears all in all moves that, especially if Fields which I think he will, if he can step his throwing game up, stop the running, the Bears could be a problem, and they could be a legit match with Detroit. I see him. They could be the toughest team, the second toughest team in the North. I still think
Well,
Detroit's going to be better than them this year.
No. Come on now. You're overlooking Minnesota.
I'm not overlooking Minnesota. I just think they've lost too many key people, and the money's just not there to get any more real significant help. So it depends on the rookies that they got plugging these holes. Now, I'm not going to write Minnesota off either, but they're in a make it break it year, because to me, if they don't make it this year, a big rebuild's coming next year in Minnesota. And you might get that because Kirk Cousins, last year, Minnesota's making him play to earn it. So he did it. You guys did it to him one time before, and he won, and he accepted the challenge and earned a better contract and had a pretty good year. So can he do it again? So I mean, there's a lot of things in Minnesota for me. I'm not overlooking them, but I'm not sold on them. I honestly, I think there could be even a coaching change. I think the coach is starting to get on the hot seat up there. Or no, wait a minute. They just hired a coach not that long ago. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking Zimmer was there. Your background's messed up, buddy.
Oh, my background got all screwed up. Well, that's all right. I'm used to it here. So anyway, let's talk about Minnesota. You can see the players that they've re-signed. And then for me, it's the free agent signings that I think are going to be helpful. And of course, the drafted players. They're coming off their first division title in several years under new head coach Kevin O'Connell. Of course, Green Bay has faded into the distance now because of the loss of Aaron Rodgers. You know, they did re-sign and, work out a deal with Jordan Love so that, they don't have to just exercise the fifth-year option. He's going to be there for the next 2 years with decent money coming in. And, I think that that's interesting that they did that because they didn't have to do that. But I think that that is a sign of growth by the organization where they are, they're not kind of keeping the quarterback in the dark, like they have in the past here. I think they're trying to do things a little bit differently with him. But, going back to Minnesota here, in our mock draft, picked Jordan Addison. He gets taken for real by the Vikings. He'll be the replacement for Adam Thielen, who left for Carolina. So, you'll have Addison and Jefferson out wide, KJ Osborne, and then they signed Brandon Powell, at wide receiver. And then, we traded for TJ Hawkinson with you guys last year, lost Irv Smith Jr. to the Cincinnati Bengals. So we bring in Josh Oliver. So you've got Oliver and Hawkinson at tight end. They did not address their offensive line in either the draft or free agency so far. And that worries me a little bit because it felt like when we got down to the goal line, we were always being overpowered by the defensive line. We couldn't get in the end zone the last 6 weeks of the season. If it was 1st and goal at the 2, if we didn't throw it in, we weren't scoring. We couldn't run it in. And I don't know if that is, Dalvin Cook's inability to do it, if it's the offensive line, or we just playing defenses that were too good. But it sure felt like that it was, to me, it felt like it was Dalvin Cook's fault. And so maybe, maybe they're recognizing that. Maybe we'll see a lot more Alexander Madison when we get down near they were able to keep Harrison Smith. They lost Eric Kendricks. had to release him. And, so they bring in, we lost Patrick Peterson. So we're working on our corners. They got Byron Murphy coming in. Mekhi Blackman comes over, in the draft. So they are working on their defense a little bit. And I think the defense will be much more improved under new defensive coordinator Brian Flores. But the interesting two here are the bottom two in the drafted section. Jaron Hall was the starting quarterback for BYU. He came in and performed well after Zach Wilson left to go be with the Jets. And, he put up some pretty good numbers. He is a little bit more mobile than people would want to give him credit for. And then the other one here is Dwayne McBride out of the University of Alabama, Birmingham. When this draft pick was made, even though it was later on, you can find really good running backs later in the draft. Look at Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. And so this guy here was a workhorse for UAB. And when this pick was made, I started thinking, man, maybe after June 1st, if they couldn't find a trade partner for Dalvin Cook, maybe he gets cut. Maybe it'll be Madison and McBride in the backfield this upcoming season. A lot of these players on offense that are being brought in fit the Los Angeles Rams Sean McVay style offense, where this guy is both a receiver and a runner. Could catch a lot of screen passes coming up in this upcoming season. And I just hope that these guys all remain healthy, with preseason and rookie camps and everything goes forward. But back to Jaron Hall for a minute. Kirk Cousins is not under contract after this year. Now there's going to be an opportunity to re-sign him. They could technically franchise him at the end of the season if they don't work out a deal or they don't feel like they've got the guy that they need. There was some rumblings that he might get traded this offseason with only a year left on his deal to the 49ers because Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator in Washington when he was over there. And so, but, I like the draft that they put together. Limited picks, only 6, but they did address a lot of needs that they had other than offensive line. What do you think, Chris, of the draft that the Vikings put together?
I think they had a solid draft. I think they did with what they could with what they had to deal with. Also, like I said, I think you could be right on Jaron Hall. He could be Kurt's replacement. Like I said, I think this year is a make it or break it year for Minnesota because they were so tight on cap this year. We all know
there'll be no pressure for Hall to play. He is in a good spot to sit and learn because the backup quarterback, I believe is still Kellen Mond.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. It's a perfect year for him to be there. Because Kirk Cousins is going to have to play to the point to either earn a new contract if they have the money that he's going to want, or even to be franchise tagged. If you guys don't make the playoffs, let's say this year, and go way back than what you were last year and the years prior, I think Jalen Hall might get the nod. They might actually start a rebuild, get that cap worked back out, and put themselves in a back position to compete, to become a contender in maybe a year to two until they, all the cap situations figured out and get a bunch of young players and develop them. That's a strong possibility, but I also think, if Minnesota comes And even if they lose the division to the Lions per se, or even the Bears, but as long as they make the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, then I could see the Vikings making it work with Kirk Cousins to stay around, and maybe they try to keep this team intact and figure a way to add on for next season. But that's just where I see the Vikings. To me, they could still be a good team, depending. Some of these rookies are going to see immediate play time. So it really just, to me, it really just depends on how this year goes for them. How the rookies that are going to have to step in and play from day one, how are they going to develop week in and week out? Are they going to be as good as they were last year? What's going to happen with Cook? Who's going to be your running backs? I mean, time will tell, but I believe the pressure is on Minnesota to perform.
Well, and so we got one more team here just to briefly talk about, not from the NFC North, but a team that a lot of people are saying had a really good draft. And part of the reason they had such a good draft is because the New England Patriots wanted to screw the New York Jets a little bit and traded their pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers so the Steelers could select the offensive tackle the Jets were looking at in Broderick Jones. And so, they started out, day one really well. The offensive line is getting better in Pittsburgh. They also signed, in the offseason, they got Nate Herbig, and the big pickup at guard was Isaac Seumalo from Philadelphia. One of the starters on the offensive line for Philadelphia comes over to Pittsburgh. And with the addition of him and Herbig and Broderick Jones, I think the offensive line is going to be much more improved. That'll open up a lot more spots for Najee Harris to run the football. They'll be able to protect that blind side of Kenny Pickett against a division that, frankly, is a blitzing style, zone blitz defense, defenses all throughout the AFC North. Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, really get after the quarterback. And, you can see there Patrick Peterson was brought in, and from Minnesota there at corner. The big pickup in linebacker was Cole Holcomb, the leading tackler for the Washington Commanders, joins the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in the drafted section here, you've got a big-time run-stuffing defensive tackle in Keanu Benton. I know that we considered him a reach when he was selected in the first round of our mock draft. And so, Troy Strong's got to be like, oh, my God, he went to the Steelers, but that's exactly what they were looking for, is somebody like that on their team. Of course, they get the namesake, Joey Porter Jr., comes in, plays for the team that his dad played his whole career for. And so, at corner, he can learn from Patrick Peterson. And they needed the depth at corner anyway with the loss of Cameron Sutton, among others. The tight end, Darnell Washington, is a big target from Georgia, but he's mostly a run-blocking tight end. More help for Najee Harris in that running game. I like that they added, a couple more pieces to their secondary. They got Nick Herbig on the edge rusher there and another offensive lineman in Spencer Anderson for depth. And so, Pittsburgh, a lot of people are overlooking them with the signing of Lamar Jackson, Odell Beckham Jr., all going to Baltimore. They're talking about how they're going to open up this offense, and Baltimore is the favorite, despite Cincinnati being the two-time defending division champion with Joe Burrow. Here's the Steelers kind of waiting in the wings. Mike Tomlin has still not had a losing season in all the years that he has been the head coach of the Steelers. Well, he can't go 8-8 no more. there's not an even number of games anymore, you know. And last year, 9-8, you know. Now they didn't make the playoffs, but they did the year before with Roethlisberger. They don't make the playoffs this year with Kenny Pickett, but they're on the cusp of making them. And now they add, you know, more offensive arsenal, more defensive help. The team that's built on the run game and defense for years is back to doing that same thing. Okay. They're going to run the football. They're going to play great defense. And they've got this young quarterback who, the longer the season went on, the better he got. And so I think the Steelers are going to be dangerous this year.
I think if they could still need a year to develop still a lot of young players. But do I think they have a legit chance to be making noise and make a presence? For sure. The only why I say that is because I do believe Cincinnati will win the division. I still think Baltimore, especially if Lamar throws the ball more this year, can stay healthy, I still see them as a playoff caliber team. I'm not saying the Steelers cannot make the playoffs, but with those two teams being the one and two teams, it just puts them in a harder spot because they, you know, it's hard for three teams to make it to a division with it, especially in a stacked AFC already. So that's why I'm saying it might take them a year, because that is a real problem that they're going to be facing in the AFC side, is that third team. Can they still sneak? Can a third team sneak in the wild card for Liskin in reality of how strong the AFC truly is? So that I think that does play a factor. But like you said, Tomlin has not had a losing season at all. I think Tomlin is the coach that he could take this team to the playoffs this year. I do like what they've done over there in Pittsburgh, and they're definitely building their model of football again, right between our eyes. They're determined. I believe, like the Steelers, that one team that hasn't really changed their fundamentals of their team. Like they're still playing 90s football over there, in my eyes. Yes, do they add different type of plays and, you know, the speed type of the games? Of course. But if you break that offense and defense down, they're still playing 90s football compared to what other teams use. And they're still dominant with that same scheme. And I do expect the Steelers within the next couple of years to be the Steelers again. They have proved, especially Tomlin is proven, it don't matter what he faces, who he has, injuries, he can get stuff done.
Well, let's get to the final segment of the show here, the controversial part of the show, where I show you the predictions for this upcoming year. These predictions are based on the schedule without the timing of the schedule, but we've had our main round of free agency. The quarterbacks have been signed. The quarterbacks have been traded. We've had the draft. We've seen the undrafted free agents that are being brought in. And so the way too early section of this prediction here, picks with David, before the schedule timing, will begin in the AFC East, where I originally had thinking that, you know, Aaron Rodgers was going to be with the Jets. I had the Jets winning the division earlier. You know, we know Buffalo is going to be strong, but after reviewing everything that has happened, I have the Miami Dolphins. Now, of course, this is contingent upon Tua Tagovailoa remaining healthy. They've got those great receivers. They added another running back to an already fabulous running back room. The defense has gotten stouter here in this offseason. I think that Buffalo has taken a little bit of a step back. with some of the players that they have lost. The Jets are going to be, of course, much improved, definitely a winning record, probably make the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers. What do you think of the AFC East, Chris?
The only question, I pretty much agree with you, except I think the Jets could pass Buffalo for second. And it really depends on Tua. I do see that Miami's made the best moves, more dominant moves in that division. They've got a real team down there. And it really depends on Michael White. Because Tua goes down, White could step in possibly and still get him the division win. But it really just depends on how that whole situation plays out. But I agree. On paper right now, that's how I would have it on paper. So except the only thing I would have is the Jets ahead of Buffalo. I think Buffalo's lost a little too much. And they didn't really add nothing, no one, but it really depends because I just feel like Buffalo's on the verge of.
I had Buffalo winning the Super Bowl last year, and they were really at the end of the season, they really disappointed me. They just didn't have any pop in their offense. The defense was letting other teams kind of walk all over them. Cincinnati bullied them at home, in the snow, in Buffalo, in the playoffs. That should have been Buffalo's game. And they looked like they were flat and got their butt taken to the woodshed. And that's why I think Cincinnati, despite losing, their safeties, they brought in some good replacements. They haven't lost any major people on their offense. Now, they did lose Hayden Hurst, but he was a one-year stopgap at tight end. They added Irv Smith Jr., they got another tight end in the draft. I think they maintain their hold on the AFC North, but it is going to be a barn burner between them and the Ravens and the Steelers. I've got the Steelers making the playoffs, just based on the reason they're going to have a better record than Buffalo or the Jets, or even Denver at this point is because of the teams that they're playing against.
Yeah.
A lot of their hard games are at home. And so, they're probably going to split the season against Cincinnati. They'll probably split the season against Baltimore, but I think that Cleveland is going to be the dog in that division. They may win a game here or there against the other three, but they're not going to be anywhere near as good as the top three teams in that division. And so, I've got Cincinnati and Pittsburgh making the playoffs. Only a head-to-head matchup between the two puts Cincinnati ahead in that division.
I agree with you. The only thing I want to say is just because I said it before, I still see Baltimore as a playoff team, but like I said, the Steelers could push them out. I'm going to be
listen. Here's how I feel about Baltimore. Okay, too much hype. Okay, just too much hype. All talk, no deeds. Okay, actions. Okay, just because Lamar Jackson signed a big contract doesn't mean that's going to keep him from getting hurt. He's 100%. Been hurt the last 2 years. I don't care that they brought in the receivers that they brought in. If you've got Tyler Huntley throwing the ball to them because Lamar Jackson's on the sideline, they're not going to beat the better teams in the division. That's my take on Baltimore. So we move to the AFC South. Jacksonville has got a stranglehold on that division. I think they are going to have an excellent season upcoming this year. They have a very good schedule. because mainly they're playing the AFC South. So there's 6 games for them that are easily winnable. Now they do go on the road to play some of the big boys, and that's where their losses will come from. Indianapolis will be improved under first-year head coach Shane Steichen, but I think the defense will let them down, and they'll miss the playoffs because of that. Houston will be improved. Tennessee's going to fall back, as they're basically, we've talked about it, they're in a rebuild, and they're in the toughest conference. And so between Houston and Tennessee, they're down at the bottom of the barrel, looking up at all these other high-powered teams in the AFC.
I have no complaints on that. I agree 100% on that.
Just thinking about Jacksonville a little bit more, they added Calvin Ridley last year, and he was suspended, so they're going to get their first look at him playing in a Jaguar uniform this year. Now, while they did lose Marvin Jones Jr., they have other really good receivers on that team. Christian Kirk, being one of them. And, they've got Zay Jones and a few others. And I like what they have done, with, they're working on their offensive and defensive lines, this offseason. And it's the battle in the trenches, as we all know.
Yeah.
That is what makes these teams go in the, in the playoffs. We get to the AFC West. Kansas City still the king in the AFC. Despite some of the losses, you cannot doubt them. Last year, everybody, they're rebuilding. They're, they lost Tyreek Hill. They just reloaded and kept coming. And that's basically what has happened this year. In the draft, they got a receiver to replace Juju Smith-Schuster. The defensive players that they lost, they replaced in both the draft and in free agency. Younger, cheaper talent, still going with Big Red Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. Now, Denver will be much more improved than last year because of the steady coaching there by Sean Payton. I think the Chargers take a step back. I think that the coach is going to be in trouble there. Josh McDaniels is not a head coach. I don't like what they have done this offseason. While I do like what they did with Jimmy Garoppolo, bringing him in because he knows the system, you basically traded one quarterback for another that are, nearly equal when it comes to the kind of way they play the game. And so, it's all about, why did you make this change? Was it because of the amount of money that they were going to have to pay him? Because I think they're paying Garoppolo more money than they were going to be paying Carr.
Yeah.
And so, this is just a mistake, I think, for the Raiders. I don't see them making a lot of noise this year. Let's move to the NFC. Go ahead there. Talk about the NFC East, Chris.
I agree. I agree with this for the most part. Eagles, for the hands down, win the division. I see the Giants actually making the playoffs over the Cowboys, possibly. It really depends on just where Dallas is. Dallas always starts the season really good, but then when it gets down to crunch time, they fall apart. I think Daniel Jones and the Giants, they had amazing Cinderella year last year. And with the people they added this offseason and the draft, I feel solid enough that they could make the playoffs with the next year as well. And I think the Cowboys are going to be in a fight. They're going to have to fight just to really be able to taste playoffs. The Commanders, I could see 5-12 for sure, but who knows? You never know with them. They're 1 minute they're good, 1 minute they're bad. I'm still not 100% sure what's the quarterback picture looking like over there. So but I don't expect a lot of noise from them either. But that's my outlook of the NFC East. I think it's Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, Commanders.
And that's fine. These are just predictions. We all have our opinions on everybody. I think that the Eagles, despite their losses in free agency, the schedule that they are playing, the people they've added, through the draft, I think that their defense will continue to be stout. The offense is going to look to try and improve. They're bringing a lot of their veteran players back, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, and they're running it back. They signed Jalen Hurts to the big contract, so he's happy. They brought in some more running backs, to get a little bit younger and a little bit more explosive. And, so Eagles clearly the best team in the division. The reason I have Dallas at 2 and not the Giants is, first of all, they have not signed Saquon Barkley. He does not want to play on the franchise tag. I think he thought he was going to be scot-free and in free agency because Daniel Jones wasn't going to sign a deal, and they were going to have to franchise Daniel Jones. So Saquon's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't think that their defense is, going to be as good as it was last year. They lost a few pieces here and there. While the offense may improve, there's tape on the way they play now. They've got the Buffalo Bill offense from New York Giants, a full season of that. Everybody's had all offseason to dissect and get ready for that. Whereas Dallas is going to have a whole new offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore left and went to the Chargers, in this offseason. So you're going to see some different play calling. They're not going to have Ezekiel Elliott lumbering behind the offensive line anymore. They brought in Robert Jones III, from Kansas City, previously from Tampa Bay. Between him and Tony Pollard, and then, kind of a steal in the draft. I can't believe he lasted as long as he did. K-State's Deuce Vaughn is going to be in Dallas. And so, I think that they're going to do a lot of really impactful running. They brought in Brandon Cooks, so now they could stretch the field at wide receiver. The defense, is going to be just as good as it has been. They re-signed a lot of their players. They didn't let anybody of circumstance leave. And that's the reason that I have them going second. In the NFC North, I have Minnesota retaining the title only based on division record. I think that when it comes down to it, Minnesota will win one more game than Detroit will in the division. Not necessarily head-to-head, because I think they'll split the series this year. I think it'll come down to Detroit has a mishap against Chicago, or something like that. And that's the reason why I have Minnesota and Detroit, 1 and 2. Both teams make the playoffs. Dallas gets the 7 seed, Detroit gets the 6 seed because Detroit beats Dallas this year. And, Chicago improves to 7 and 10. Green Bay falls back to 6 and 11. And that's my take on the NFC North.
My NFC North is Lions win the division.
Homer.
Hey, I could say Homer to you twice.
Oh.
Just saying, guy. I just really feel like the Lions are the better team in the North. I believe, and honestly, I would take Chicago possibly second, but I'm going to give it to Minnesota only because I got to see more out of Fields. I haven't seen Fields actually sit and throw the ball more than he's ran the ball yet. So it all depends where his actions are. I do believe he does now have a wide out corner that I think he could finally trust and be able to throw the ball and play the quarterback position to a different level than we've seen out of him. But until I see all of his decision making play out, I'm going to leave Minnesota in the second, Chicago in the third, and the Packers, I believe, take the basement. But like I said earlier, when we talked about Minnesota's whole team is on a make it, break it. If they make the playoffs, the team could possibly stay intact as much as they could possibly keep. But if they don't make it, it's a big rebuild coming in Minnesota. So that's a lot of pressure. So I could see them being the team that slips up more than the other teams around, because not only are they having to worry about, Chicago being better, the Lions being better, now you got the added pressure knowing that jobs are on the line and all the above.
Yeah.
And that's just my opinion with the North Sat right now. It's going to be exciting. I will say that.
In the NFC South, we talked about New Orleans. They've added Derek Carr. They've added the running back there, so they've still got a good, strong running game. Lots of good receivers. They've worked on their offensive line, and we know they got a good defense. Carolina in second, but not close to winning the division with all of the additions that they have, especially if they start the rookie quarterback. There will be some struggles there, but they will have a winning record and, just missed the playoffs as they look to move forward. I think that while Atlanta is going to have a lot of offense, they got no defense, and Tampa Bay is the other way. I don't expect them to have a whole lot of offense. I think their defense will be good. But, you got two teams that, are in the cellar in that division, looking up at a couple of teams that really struck their claim to what they plan to do this, upcoming year. First in free agency was New Orleans, and then in the draft was Carolina. What do you think, buddy?
I'm on the same page. I mean, there's a chance for Atlanta to, shock the world and be better than the Panthers, but, their quarterback has a lot less games underneath his belt. Their defense still has a lot of questions. So I wouldn't change much, but I will say Atlanta could be that dark horse in that division.
Yeah, well, and in the NFC West, kind of like Ron said in his post here, San Francisco and Seattle with a close second there. The other two are in the cellar. I think the Rams will pick up a game here and there and win about 7. But Arizona looks to be the worst team in the NFL. They'll have the number 1 pick in the draft and possibly the number 2 pick, with Houston's 5-12 season. If that turns out to be the case, I've got a lot of other 5-12 teams on this list here. Tampa Bay is 4-13, so they wouldn't necessarily have the second pick. It'd be Arizona then Tampa Bay, which, interestingly enough, that is also the way Pro Football Focus has it, as when you go back to the Pro Football Focus mock draft tool, they've got the 2024 guys already input, and the draft order has Kansas City winning the Super Bowl over the Philadelphia Eagles again. And then they've got Cincinnati and Buffalo right there. And then Arizona's got the number 1 and the number 2 picks, and then Tampa Bay is picking 3rd.
I can see it definitely playing out. The only thing is here with San Francisco, I will say it depends on Purdy.
Who's playing quarterback?
Exactly. If he can start the season by chance, then I can see that being a realistic record. If he can't and Trey Lance gets the helm, I'm not sure they end up 13-4.
Yeah.
Now, I still see him as a playoff team when Purdy comes back. I think he can still save the season. but that might leave a gap, just enough gap for Seattle to sneak in there
Yeah.
and get the division.
Well, buddy, it's been a real good show again here this week.
Yes,
And,
it has.
I always enjoy doing this, but I'm not trying to spring this on you. I was going to, text you or whatever, but I think I'm going to take next week off. Going to take a week off from Sunday Spectacular. But we've been doing really good. We're in the doldrums of the off season. Well, we are going to have the reveal of the schedule coming out this week. As far as the games and where they're going to be played, I think that's something that we could definitely dive into in a couple of weeks. I've got a few people for you lined up possibly to do your interviews on Tuesday and Thursday night.
Okay.
Do you got anybody already signed up?
I do not. I have openings. Also, I was actually speaking of Sunday, I was going to ask you if you might want to do a show maybe Monday or Tuesday or something, because Sunday is Mother's Day. I know my mom wants me to do a thing already. So I was going to say probably Sunday night wouldn't be a good night, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be with their mothers and doing stuff all through the day. They're probably not going to want to
do a quick
be
show later in the week.
But other than that, everything's open Tuesday and Thursday. So if you got somebody, let me know, and I could definitely fill them in.
I'd still like you to get Joshua for the Pittsburgh Steelers on here. Maybe we can get Robert Ross to talk about the Houston Texans and the deals they made. We just got to reach out and talk to them.
Okay.
But from Kansas, this is Big Dave. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again here on the broadcast again real soon.
And always, this is Chris. Thank you for joining us. A great show, a great time. If you're watching us, please go to 4TH&Goal Sports on Facebook, like the page, hit the notifications. Thank you guys for all tuning in. It's been a great night. Also, stay tuned. Look for the banner I put. We'll either have a show Tuesday or Thursday of next week. Also, as you've seen, Sunday, we're not doing a show because of Mother's Day. We'll probably do one maybe Monday or Tuesday. Also, I'll probably set up interviews, and then we'll pick up Sundays as usual. So stay tuned. I always post and advertise when we do a show. Until the next show, we'll see you then. Thank you guys. Have a good night. We'll see you later, David.